He walked into the ER bleeding, refused treatment for himself. He was severely injured. A man in critical condition walked into the emergency room bleeding profusely. The doctors were shocked to see what he said. Our next Reddit story is from a user. It was several years ago that my husband's cousin, who we'll call Joe, went to the emergency room at our local hospital. At the time, my husband and I lived in a small town in Canada, so we knew most of the doctors there. We knew Joe to be a big lug who had a heart of gold, but wasn't exactly the smartest guy around. He meant well, but he always did things in his own special way. Sometimes it worked out, and sometimes it didn't. But even when it didn't, he never let it get him down or cause him to change his ways. Joe called us in a panic one Saturday morning because he had hurt himself while chopping wood. He had pulled something in his stomach, and it felt like there was a knife twisting inside of him. He tried to drive himself to the hospital, but the pain was too much, and he passed out in his truck. My husband rushed over to help while I called 911, and the ambulance came to take Joe to the hospital. The next thing we heard was that Joe had been discharged from the hospital and was back home. We're surprised because we knew how bad his injury was. When my husband got to his house, he found Joe sitting in his favorite chair with a towel wrapped around his waist and another on the floor in front of him. He looked pale, but he was otherwise fine. When my husband asked what had happened, Joe said that the doctor told him that he had torn a hole in his bowel and would need surgery to fix it. Apparently they told him that he could live, but it would be touch and go. Then they wheeled him into surgery. When Joe came out of the anesthesia, he asked for a cigarette and a beer. The nurse told him that he couldn't have either, so he refused to cooperate and just lay there glaring at the nurses until he was discharged. That's why he was back home and not still in the hospital. My husband was angry and frustrated, but he helped Joe get settled for the night and then went home.
Ow.
In the morning, my father-in-law drove over to check on Joe. He was furious when he found out what Joe had done. He yelled at Joe, telling him that he could have died and that if he had, his sons would have been without a father and his wife would have been without a husband. All Joe did was shrug his shoulders and say it had to be done. We were all confused and concerned, but we didn't think much more of it until the next day when my sister-in-law called us in a panic. She was at her parents' house, and they had just gotten a call from Joe's wife saying that she was going into labor. They rushed to the hospital where Joe's wife gave birth to their baby boy, who we'll call Jaden. And yes, Joe was there the whole time. While the nurses were helping his wife, Joe told my sister-in-law that he wanted to quit smoking. When he learned that she was an ex-smoker, he asked her to help him quit. She readily agreed and helped him kick the habit cold turkey. A couple of days later, we all got together at the hospital to meet the new baby and congratulate Joe's wife. Joe told us that he had been in intensive care for 2 days after the surgery and had only been home for 2 days before his wife went into labor. He also admitted that he had torn his bowel so badly that if he hadn't gone to the hospital when he did, he could have died. What he didn't tell us, and I'm sure he didn't know this himself, was that he had saved not only himself but his wife and son by refusing treatment at the hospital. You see, after his surgery, Joe had developed a rare but serious complication known as necrotizing enterocolitis. This happens when part of the bowel dies due to a loss of blood flow. If left untreated, it can lead to sepsis and death. After he refused treatment at the hospital, Joe was able to avoid the antibiotics and pain medication that would have masked the symptoms of this complication. Had he taken those medications, it's likely that he would have seemed fine, and his body wouldn't have shown any signs of the dying tissue. As a result, his body would have absorbed toxins produced by the dead tissue, causing sepsis and eventually killing him. When Joe refused treatment, his body rejected the dead tissue and expelled it in the form of bloody diarrhea. This brought his condition to the forefront and allowed doctors to treat the actual problem instead of just covering up the symptoms. Within hours of being readmitted to the hospital, Joe was on the operating table again, and doctors were able to remove the dead section of his bowel and reconnect the healthy ends. If he hadn't refused treatment the first time, and if he hadn't refused pain medication and antibiotics afterwards, he wouldn't have made it. Joe ended up making a full recovery. And now, jokes about how he got to quit smoking cold turkey, and how he has such great health insurance because of his son. His wife teases him mercilessly about the whole ordeal, and he loves every minute of it. I am glad that your Joe is okay now. What a wild story. Poor guy. Talk about bad luck. It's one heck of a rough situation to be in. Down in the comments, people shared their thoughts. One person said, "Stupid." Maybe, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Another person said, "He's lucky the second hospital stay caught it early enough to save him. If it had been just a little bit longer and his entire system was filled with toxins, there's a good chance he wouldn't have made it no matter what they did. Also, congratulations to him for quitting smoking. I wish I could just have someone wave a magic wand and make me stop smoking. That stuff is expensive, and it kills you." Someone else added, "I'm a medical professional, and this is a very good example of how informed you have to be about your health and advocate for yourself. There are many drugs out there that might not be good for you for various reasons, and it's important to know that. However, knowledge isn't power unless you actually use it. Most of the time when people make these decisions, they are misinformed or don't understand the consequences of them. I'm not saying that it's good to refuse treatment, but rather to make sure that you know what you're doing and why." This next comment was both funny and true. My dad is a surgeon, and he told me a story about a homeless guy that came in with a stab wound in his abdomen. When they opened him up, they found out that he had a Bible tucked into his abdomen where his guts should be. So apparently he had put it there himself when he was given the option of getting surgery or getting nothing because he was homeless. He chose the Bible. He said that he was a strong believer and wanted God to heal him. Dad said that the Bible was literally stuffed with intestines. It was crazy. Then another Reddit user said, "I used to work in a hospital pharmacy, and we had a guy come in who was diabetic and had gangrenous toes. Basically, the circulation in his feet was so poor that the nerves and flesh had died and turned black. He had to have them amputated. We called the patient and told him that we had his meds ready for pickup. And he said, 'Oh no, I'm fine now. Don't need them.' He refused to take insulin or any of his other meds. His family came to pick up his prescriptions, and they told us that he had kicked the bucket the day before. Morbid, I know, but I thought it was kind of poetic justice that he ran out of meds on his last day. Some people just want to die." Well, that's today's Reddit story. If you like it, please hit the thumbs up button, because I put out new videos every single day. If you want to be reminded about them, then please subscribe. I'd appreciate it. I'll see you tomorrow.